Star Trek's 4 Federation founders appeared in one TOS episode, it's surprisingly rare for all 4 founding members of the United Federation of Planets to appear on screen together, but they did so in Star Trek, the original series Season 2, Episode 15, Journey to Babel. Founded in 2161, the Federation was an interstellar union of planets based on shared principles and sought to further the universal rights of sentient life. 4 planets founded Star Trek's Federation: Earth, Vulcan, Teller, and Andoria. These 4 worlds previously formed a coalition during the Babel Crisis, which ultimately led to the Earth-Romulan War and the eventual founding of the United Federation of Planets. A century later, the 4 Federation founders were once again en route to the very system in which the Coalition of Planets was first formed. In Star Trek, the original series, Season 2, Episode 15, Journey to Babel, Captain James T. Kirk, William Shatner, is tasked with transporting diplomats to a conference about the potential admission of Corridon to the United Federation of Planets. Journey to Babel is most notable for introducing Spock's mother and father, but it also introduced the Federation's 4 founding member species. Star Trek, TOS, introduced all 4 Federation founders. Star Trek, the original series, Season 2, Episode 15, Journey to Babel, introduced the Andorians and Tellarites into the canon, while confirming that the Vulcans played a diplomatic role within the Federation. Spock's father, Ambassador Sarek, Mark Leonard, is introduced as an influential and important diplomat within the United Federation of Planets. While Journey to Babel never confirms that Earth, Vulcan, Teller, and Andoria founded the Federation, one particular scene does establish the importance of each species. At a diplomatic dinner, Captain Kirk and Ambassador Sarek become engaged in conversation with the Tellarite Ambassador, Gav, John Wheeler, and Andorian Ambassador, Shras, Reggie Nalder. The way in which all 4 representatives of these Federation worlds interact with each other implies their importance to diplomatic affairs. For example, Sarek and Gav are old political sparring partners, meaning that they must regularly debate with each other on Federation matters. Most tellingly, the Orion Syndicate's assassin specifically targets the Tellarite Ambassador and Captain Kirk, emphasizing that their influence makes them prime targets. Andorians and Tellarites didn't become important until later Star Trek. Decades later, Star Trek Enterprise built on Journey to Babel to establish that the Tellarites, Andorians, Vulcans, and humans were the original founders of the United Federation of Planets. This gave the Tellarites and Andorians a level of importance in the Star Trek universe that had previously been denied to them. While the Tellarites and Andorians continued to appear in Star Trek after Journey to Babel, they were always relegated to minor roles. By introducing Felix Schran, Jeffrey Combs, in Star Trek Enterprise, there was a chance to explore Andorian society and lay the groundwork for their co-founding of the Federation. More recently, the Tellarites have had a huge renaissance courtesy of Star Trek Prodigy on Netflix. One of Prodigy's lead characters, Jankum Pog, Jason Mantzoukas, is a Tellarite, the first member of the species to be a regular character in a Star Trek show. Also in Prodigy, the USS Voyager 8, commanded by Admiral Catherine Janeway, Kate Mulgrew, has a Tellarite medical officer, LT. Noom, Jason Alexander, an Andorian No. 1, Commander Tyses, David Diggs, and Vulcan Cadet Majel Michaela Dietz. Decades after Star Trek, the original series introduced them, all 4 founding Federation members finally have key roles on a Starfleet ship. I agree with Chris Pine. Star Trek 4 should scale down. I agree with Chris Pine. Star Trek 4 should scale down. Pine has opined that Star Trek 4 would be better as a modestly budgeted film that focuses more on story and character development than action and explosions. Pine headline 3JJ. Abrams produced Star Trek blockbusters as Captain James T. Kirk. Since then, Pine has become a director himself. Although his debut film, Pullman, didn't get a warm critical reception, Chris's instincts about Star Trek 4 are still on the money. J.J. Abrams' Star Trek 2009 was a shot in the arm the franchise needed. Abrams' hyperkinetic reboot gave new life to Star Trek, infusing the venerable saga with spectacular widescreen scope, a thrillingly relentless pace, and truly galactic stakes. Abrams' miraculous Star Trek cast, led by Chris Pine as Kirk, Zachary Quinto as Spock, and Carl Urban as Dr. McCoy, also proved the USS Enterprise's iconic characters could be embodied by new actors. However, as Abrams' Star Trek movies kept getting bigger, returns diminished. Now 8 years and counting since Star Trek Beyond, Paramount Pictures still can't figure out what to do with Star Trek. But Chris Pine gets it. Go smaller. Star Trek 4 would be better as a smaller scale movie. I co-sign Chris Pine's opinion that Star Trek 4 should be made for the die-hard fans who already love Star Trek, instead of Paramount seeking the more fickle general audience. Star Trek has a dedicated fan base that spans generations, yet it's not as sizable as the audience that devours Star Wars or Marvel Studios movies. Pine believes that Star Trek 4 should not try to compete with Marvel and deliver the kind of stories Star Trek fans love, which involve beloved characters taking on a moral dilemma and solving an unsolvable puzzle. This would indeed be a refreshing change of pace from the dire galactic threats J.J. Abrams' Starship Enterprise faced. Although Quentin Tarantino backed away from his plan to make Star Trek 4, the inimitable director was also on the right track. Tarantino wanted to make a gangster picture inspired by the 1960s Star Trek episode, A Piece of the Action. Quentin's R-rated Star Trek romp likely wouldn't have appeased Paramount's desire for a big box office spectacle, but it would have been an intriguing, smaller-scale Star Trek movie. Pine thinks, and I concur, that a Star Trek 4 that's about the characters and not about the crisis is what the core trucker audience wants. And after all, if word of mouth says a movie is good, a wider audience will seek it out. Trying to go bigger is what's keeping Star Trek 4 from getting made. J.J. Abrams' Star Trek movies showed Vulcan exploding, almost sparked a war with the Klingons, and saw the biggest space station ever seen in Star Trek nearly destroyed. How do you top that? The answer is, don't. It's better to go the other direction and focus on the Starship Enterprise characters fans are already invested in. None of the chaos Krall, Idris Elba, caused in Star Trek Beyond is as memorable to me as Kirk asking Spock, "What would I do without you?" and Spock dryly replying, "I don't know, Jilla," Sophia Boutella calling Kirk James T., or Commodore Paris, Shari Adashlu, kindly commiserating with Kirk about how easy it is to get lost in the vastness of space. Star Trek 4 is being billed as the final chapter of Chris Pine's USS Enterprise crew, and coming up with a story of suitable grandeur may be stymieing the film. But the answer is to make Star Trek 4 about the characters, who are now in middle age, and what they mean to each other. Star Trek 2, The Wrath of Khan is beloved, not because it's an epic action film, but because it is about friendship, old age, and death. For Star Trek fans, personal stakes are more important than the fate of the galaxy. Star Trek 4, following Chris Pine's lead to be about a great story focusing on the Starship Enterprise's family, would deliver more dividends and make Star Trek fans happier than another big-budget, planet-destroying spectacle. Star Trek 4 is being billed as the final chapter of Chris Pine's USS Enterprise crew, and coming up with a story of suitable grandeur may be stymieing the film. But the answer is to make Star Trek 4 about the characters, who are now in middle age, and what they mean to each other. Star Trek 2, The Wrath of Khan is beloved, not because it's an epic action film, but because it is about friendship, old age, and death. For Star Trek fans, personal stakes are more important than the fate of the galaxy. Star Trek 4, following Chris Pine's leads to be about a great story focusing on the Starship Enterprise's family, would deliver more dividends